It's the truth about parenting.
Something needs to be real for us.
The truth is in the raw things that people don't talk about.
This journey is not for the weak.
Welcome to the Mama Jack podcast. May, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you today? It's so good to be here with
I'm
you.
doing good. I'm here. The sun is trying to shine.
It's
It's
trying to
warm in
shine.
Atlanta.
Metaphor
It's
for
like,
life.
right?
Yes, I hear you 100%.
Mm. Okay, so tell us about yourself. What's going on? Why are you here? Let us hear your
Um,
story.
yeah. So my dear new friend Jackie, I already feel a kindred spirit. Like I have a kindred spirit just based on your hair. I'm like,
Right?
there's there's magic in the air. So my story. Well, I'm a mom. Absolutely. I'm a mom just to a 7-year-old and a 7-year-old boy. His name is Skylar. And I've been married to my hubby for about 11 and a half years at this point. And we live in Miami. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. He's from Miami. Work brought me here many years ago. We ended up meeting, falling in love, the whole thing. So now we live here. We have a dog named Nova. And the twist and turn of my story came in May of 2020 when my husband was diagnosed with ALS, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Other parts of the world know it as MND or motor neuron disease. And it's basically a disease that affects the neurons and how they communicate with the muscles in your body. And so a person with ALS will eventually, it's almost like each of their body parts starts like turning off because the brain no longer can communicate with hands, legs, limbs. The person is still fully cognizant of everything. It typically doesn't have anything to do with affecting, who you are, but your body starts to shut down. So it was March of 2020, right around lockdown, literally the day that all the schools were locking down, at least here where I live, was when we went to the first neurologist after having gone to a couple of different visits. But that was the first time that the doctor said this might be ALS. And then the diagnosis would become more official a couple months after that. So it's been now really 4 years of a lot of intense changes and challenges, a lot of pain, a lot of joy, a lot of growth, a lot of just um, days when I have no idea like how we're gonna face another day because it's so hard. Um, and I'm proud to say we've made the most of it given the really challenging circumstances. And yeah, here we are. So that's a little bit of my story.
So obviously there were big changes that happened, not only with your husband and you, but with your child as well.
Mhm.
So do you want to talk us through some of that? Like, first of all, let's
Yeah.
talk about you and your husband. Like, what did that transition look like? And I know you're probably still transitioning every day, right? It changes day to day.
Yeah, no, that's the best way to put it. It's like every day it changes because it's not like, you know, yeah, it just keeps progressing. We're adapting all the time. So with my husband's particular type of ALS, it started affecting his limbs first, his upper arms, his upper limbs first, his arms. And so I right away started helping him basically doing all the things that he needed to do in life. And then eventually he was using a walker. Eventually he's been in a wheelchair now for a little over a year and he can still transfer from like wheelchair to bed to bathroom, things like that. Little bits here and there. Um, so yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, massive transitions. And my son was just 3 when Jules was diagnosed, and it went from, the dedication that a mom has in the early years, certainly, and he's still 7. It's still very much like, up until there forever, you have that dedication, but certainly the earlier years, that focus and that balance of now becoming a caretaker and caregiver for my husband, while still being, as whole of a mother as I could for my son was a huge, massive balancing act for me. And it took time for me to find my footing. I always wanted to make sure that energetically I could be there for my husband, and also really prioritize my son. So that was a huge act, and for him too, for Skylar, seeing his mom all of a sudden shift into dedicating all of this time and physical attention to Jules was a challenge as well. I mean, it's a lot of what he's known. All of his earliest memories are with his dad having this condition, and we're very open with him when it comes to everything that we're going through. Very like open and organic with it. So we don't hide anything from him. Whatever we're experiencing, whatever we're feeling, always being very cognizant and respectful of his own development and not wanting to overload him, uh, but not we made the decision early on, Jules and I, not to keep anything, and whatever he wanted to ask us and whatever he was expressing emotionally about it, to be open and have that be part of our experience. So that's worked very well for us. And I think having that openness has allowed us to adjust as we go and adapt a little bit better because we're not hiding this big part of our lives in any way from him. And as he's gotten older, Skylar's gotten older, it's certainly become he's thankfully very verbal, he's very expressive, and it's something I've always encouraged him in our conversations and in our dynamic and our dialogue is for him to feel like it's safe for him to say all the things and express himself, and that's been a huge gift because he can let us in a little bit more into how he's feeling, um, rather than keeping it cooped up inside, and and at the same time, we've also provided some spaces for him to speak with a therapist and people that he can. Yeah, because there's always this thing where kids, especially when they're seeing their parents go through something so hard, something very protective kicks in them, this sort of innate desires. And with him, I've noticed, Skylar, he's told me, like, he wants to be this protector. Even if, as many times as I've told him that's not his role. And there's still this thing that's just innate with him. And I also respect that and I hold space for that because I don't want to cut off that part of him that feels that, you know what I mean? But also giving him space to speak with other people. And what we've seen is that thankfully with us, he's pretty transparent. So it's not like, in the instances that he's talked to somebody else, he like lets out what he's feeling. It's kind of nice to see that it's sort of the same. We're getting a pretty authentic version of what he's moving through. Yeah.
Nice. And is he in therapy and stuff like that? Is that what you're referring to? Or
He's
just
not
like okay.
We've had a couple of visits with a child therapist. So one of the first things that Jules and I did, Jules and I both see a therapist. He does, I do, and we see somebody together. It's actually the same person, which I always say it's rare and really beautiful, but it worked out that way and it's been incredible for us and that's been from the beginning of the diagnosis. Um I actually have a visit with him after this and I'm really looking forward to it. It's always a nice space to decompress. Um One of the earlier things that Jules and I also did is we started seeing a parenting therapist who our therapist recommended. And she was great about supporting us in the earlier stages. Jules and I already had an idea of how we wanted to approach it, as I mentioned before, but talking to her was also very illuminating because she was able to let us in on some of the inner workings of how him as a 3, 4-year-old, 5-year-old was processing things at the time. So we did that as a proactive step to kind of, you know, hold space for that. Not because there was anything happening, but just to, have that additional sort of know-how in our tool set, I guess. And recently, we know somebody connected to the family who's a child psychologist, and she has spoken with Skylar a few times and had that sort of space of, so he's not in therapy, and that's certainly something that we might entertain later on if, but at least for now, it's we're we're doing pretty well with what we have set up for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever works for your family. I don't know. You said he's 7, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's in 1st grade.
Yeah. Yeah. I, um, I went through something like that when I was younger, but my parents did not handle it like you guys are.
Mm,
Not saying anything bad about my parents. I love my parents. It was also the 90s and some
yes.
of this
Very
stuff was
different
like
time for
didn't even exist. Yeah.
yes.
But yeah, my mom was sick pretty much my whole life with something different, and I fell
Mhm.
into the um emotional, like my learning emotion kind of got jumbled up a little bit for
Yeah.
me. So yeah, that was my little thing. It was 7 years old. So when I hear seven, I'm like,
Yeah,
something
it's
always is in me because there has to, I mean, every 7 years they say you go through a full like
yes.
process of change, right? From your hair to your skin to everything. Like you're basically
Yeah.
a new man. So it's like, it would make sense that at 7 years old, it's going to start hitting you different, and then 14, and then, 21, and every 7 years, approximately, it can
Yeah,
give or
no, there's
take.
certainly, and from psychology tells us that from 1 to 7, those years are so formative for the brain and the development of the young child, and by 7, they become sort of more aware of the world around them. So all of a sudden, something flips in them where you'll typically hear, and this like clockwork started happening with my sons. I thought it was so fascinating. Their sense of embarrassment, like from up until they're 7, it's like, "Oh, they do whatever, and it's all good." Like, they're not as aware of the sort of external gaze of somebody judging them. And even if there's nobody actively judging them, your inner workings of embarrassment start to, like, flare up. So you'll hear them start to, like, have that, "Oh, I'm so like, the word embarrassed. And it's also interesting because, yes, the 7-year cycle of, like, we become a new physical person every 7 years about that, which I've always
Mhm.
loved that. And there's something also connected to the cycle of Saturn, which is every 7 years. So that moment in time, if you also chart it that way, it's really fascinating when you look at astrologically speaking, it checks out. Like, there is a transition every time connected to where Saturn is transiting based on your chart. So that's also another really fascinating thing that's like tied into that whole conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I'm into all of that stuff, as we
Yeah.
know. So, how is your husband today? How's he doing? Is
Today.
he
Oh,
is he doing, on the grand scheme of things, like for somebody that's had his diagnosis for this many years, how is he
yeah.
doing?
It's a beautiful question, and he's doing very well considering everything. I mean, my husband has a very strong will and a beautiful sort of, he's been able to, from my perspective of witnessing him over the past 4 years, he's been able to hold this beautiful acceptance while not losing hope. So it's this space. I should mention with ALS, for those that aren't familiar with it, it is a terminal illness because there's no known cure. There's a couple of medications that can extend your life by months. We're talking like 3 months, 4 months. And there's trials and things going on. It's an under typically it's an underfunded for how much funding is required to make bigger changes happen for this community, and the lifespan is from diagnosis is on average between 2 to 5 years. So, and you see it shows up, while there are a lot of similarities, it shows up very different for each person that gets it. It's a very unique experience. So, we've seen it all. Like, we've had people that have had it really quickly. We've had people that are living with ALS for like 10 plus years is a rarer thing, but it does occur. Um, but for where he is right now, he we've maintained a sense of such like love and openness and humor. He's a very funny guy. He's humor for him is a core part of what makes him both deal with the shittiness of the situation and also continue to be himself and connect with the world around him. And so while physically it's a challenge every single day and he's loses something, it's like you're always grieving the loss of whether it's a physical function or the ability to not be able to eat his favorite foods. He can still chew and swallow, but it's a lot harder. It takes more energy. So most of his drinks, most of his food is like these special nutritional shakes that he takes. And he still eats little bits here and there, but that's something I know he misses. His ability to speak has also changed a lot because it affects your vocal cords. Your breath, you have to use a ventilator mask, which he started using in the evenings, and then now during the day he's using it more and more because if not, he just feels like he's, like deprived of air. So there's no way to like make it sound like there's nothing good about it at all. It's horrific. What can be good about it, if we can say it, is how the 3 of us have been able to find a world within this everything falling apart, to find a sense of, again, that love, that connection, that humor, living life as real as possible. My husband and we're joined at the hip. We love each other dearly. We're like so connected. We've gotten even more connected after this. And we also fight and we bump into each other all the time. It's like, and I remember earlier on, I felt so guilty if I would get mad at him for doing whatever stupid husband shit or saying a stupid
Yeah.
husband thing, like classic. And I would feel so guilty because I was like, oh, but we have a limited time together. That's our reality. That becomes your sort of like the tape that's always running in the background, is that our time is limited. So you can either look at that through that lens of like, oh, our time is limited, or wow, our time is limited. So we have this phrase we say right here, right now, which is like in the present, right? But that includes all the spectrum of everything. So sometimes we just like duke it out and that's how it that's how it's got to be. And in those moments, it actually feels nice because it's like, oh, okay, cool.
It's normal.
It's
It's
normal.
like a normal fighting is
It
like something that you don't enjoy, but you're like, this was a
Yes.
normal day with my
Yes,
husband. Like it didn't have to
exactly.
be so like hey and like overly showy because we were able to
100%.
fight and like, God, I feel normal right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly how both of us feel. And so finding the ways to continue to keep communicating and keep opening up to each other, keep communicating and opening up with our son, for them finding new ways to interact together, play together. One of the things, my husband grieves the most, and I know my son does too, is the ability to not be able to play with each other the way a father and a son, from playing catch to going fishing to roughhousing to all of these classic things that of course my husband dreamed of doing, of a son with a son. He loves baseball, he loves fishing. He was always a very active guy, like camping, hiking, mountain biking, like all the things, sports. And so that was all taken away from him, and all the ways that he would have liked to interact with Skylar were just robbed from his life. And so seeing them find new ways to bond, and that's also been heartbreaking and also breathtaking. It's like to see human beings do the best they can with what's been presented in front of us is it's pretty marvelous, because you really see how we can rise to that occasion and see beyond the craptastic cards we've been dealt. So, yeah.
Yeah. So now the hard question. You,
Mm.
how are you doing? How did you deal with this process? What was I mean, because we know there's grief, right? And there's probably waves of that all the time. I don't know if you share it with him or if you try to
Yeah.
keep it to yourself, if you have you talk to your therapist about it, if you have friends you talk to about it. How are you with this whole thing?
Yeah. So all of the above. I I remember when we first yes, it's been like different stages and different phases. When it first happened, it was like, the rug gets pulled from underneath your feet and you're like everything gets turned inside out and upside down. And life becomes it I remember feeling very surreal. Like this is happening and that it's not that I was like rejecting it, but you're processing it and it's like, okay. But you become like just disconnected from the world around you because the world around you is presenting all these different things and people with their sort of challenges that you used to have before this major thing happened. And it was very isolating and very like just not feeling part of anything. Him and I, thankfully, were always kind of in sync with each other. And I remember also at the beginning, in the midst of that, feeling like there was something, there was a peace within me that came from this knowing of my soul like chose this in this lifetime, and that is part of my core belief that we come prepared for the challenges that we're going to face. It doesn't mean we want them, it doesn't mean they're not going to be crazy hard, it doesn't mean we're not going to suffer and grieve and all of that and check 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 check. But underneath all of that there was this sense of, even if I don't understand it, I know that my soul came prepared for this. And I also knew that very like viscerally, very like soul wise from about my son and about my husband for sure, 100%. But that we all came in this lifetime prepared and made the decision to be together and work through this together. And I wouldn't change. Of course, I would never want my husband to have this, but if he's going to have this diagnosis, like I want to be the one who's there with him and for him. So that always gave me a lot of peace. And um and every day brings about new challenges, and sometimes in the morning I'm doing well and then in the afternoon I crash or vice versa. And I've gotten better at finding my own um inner compass through it all and understanding how to continue thriving in some way while everything is I've this sense of grief and pain and sorrow and sadness all the time. It's like you go into this exploration of grief and what does it mean to lose, begin to lose that life that you thought you were going to have and the kind of person your husband was, and find new ways to keep that alive. And the same goes for my relationship with myself. And I've had periods where I wanted to just run away from the whole situation and be like, I'm done. That's it. Like, one way ticket out of here. And I knew I would never follow through with that. But for sure, I'm just check out. And then I've had periods where it's just like, okay, here we are. And in between and everything. And right now, today, as I'm speaking with you, I feel pretty good. I feel grounded. I feel a sense of sort of inner grace, and that's come through a lot of inner work, a lot of facing shadows of my own expectations, my own experience and understanding of what's happening around me, of death, of grief, of changing, of letting go, of what does it mean to continue to grow and transform while this is happening, and seeing all of that pain as a catalyst for growth that puts you on a path of seeing yourself in a truer light than you could have before. Um, it's a massively profound gift to go through something like this and get to see yourself for who you truly, truly, truly are, because everything else gets taken away. All the labels, all the identity, things that defined your identity before are like stripped, 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 stripped. So, you know, some people might kind of hold and grip and want to control like the situation or in the outcome and just be like, and not want to let go of the things that are changing. But I've wanted to have this approach of, okay, well, whatever gets stripped away is not the essence of, why I'm here and why he's here and what this is happening. And that's also allowed me to be that much more present with him as his body has changed, as his emotions have changed, as he's going through such intense grief and sorrow. It's allowed me to be more present and connected with him, like facing that fear time and time again of what's going to happen. Because if not, then your energy just gets completely um like siphoned away. Like your energy then is focused on something else and not here. And that allows you to just open up more space for what's here.
Yeah.
And that's a constant dance that I'm doing. But I feel like while I don't know the answers, I don't know the future. I don't know, and that's okay. Um, I feel very like connected to who I am and who I am within this, and always exploring who I am outside of this thing as well, because that's then what connects me to my own truth. So yeah, it's a constant dance and roller coaster.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just talking to a friend about change today and how people say change and they just like think of it as this huge thing, right? But we're constantly changing.
Yeah.
And we really don't know if we have tomorrow. None of us. So
Mhm.
it's like, whereas your husband was given this diagnosis, right? And whatever,
Mm.
don't say whatever to be like,
Yeah, no,
rude
I
about
hear
it.
you.
But he was given this diagnosis and it's like, you can only live for today, right? Because is it like, but that's kind of everyone at the same
Yes.
time should be taking a lesson from this because you don't know what tomorrow will bring for anybody in this world. Like
Yeah.
literally no one.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the appreciation that you and your husband have for each other, I'm sure is like beyond what so many other people feel with their significant other because of that. And because of you guys actually being able to like think about that and how do we want to act with each other. And, you
Mhm.
constantly have this thought going through your head, I'm guessing.
Mhm.
Um, like, when is it? Is it this week? Is it next week? Is it 3 months from now? Is it 4 years from now? Is it
Yeah.
5 minutes? You know what I mean? So
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
that's horrifying, but at the same time, it puts things into perspective. Like a lot of things into perspective for you that I'm sure most people can't put into perspective in their day to day.
Yeah.
Like you said before, having a fight. Like, oh my gosh, I feel normal. Like you
Mhm.
can probably laugh and then I could imagine like for some reason, and I'm going to step into the spirituality kind of like I see you laughing and then almost going into tears because
Mhm.
it's like I I feel like I'm so mad, but at the same time, oh my God, this feels so good to have a normal day. And then it's like this weird, like in between, oh, like, how does my brain even process this at this moment? You know what
Mm.
I mean? And I, uh, there are so many special things that come with something like this as far as a relationship is concerned. And I don't know if you were a spiritual person before this happened or if this like started your shift,
Mhm.
but this propels you just into so many more things for yourself and your family and the beauty that I mean, I have goosebumps all over my body. The beauty that you can see that most people can't, and you can feel inside of you, and your husband can feel inside of him, and your sweet little boy can feel inside of him. Like it's just unreal. And I hate saying that
Mm.
anything like this is a blessing, right? Because it's not, we don't want our loved ones to have what am I trying to say? An exit date, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to know that. But in the reality and grand scheme of things, we all have one. And who's to say that mine isn't in 10 minutes? You know what I mean? Like, so
Mhm.
I just think it has such a beautiful layer to it because, yes, you get to actually appreciate things and let go of the things that shouldn't mean so much,
Yeah.
And I think in the future, I mean, I don't know about friendships and stuff like that. I'm sure you could see straight through a lot of things. And that was probably a huge process for you too. And it's not even necessarily that you had people that were bad for you in your life, but maybe people that you were just realizing like weren't for your highest good. And they just
Mm.
slowly, because you were like, well, my priorities aren't, gossip and like, whatever anymore. Like, I really don't care about those things. I have like other
Yep.
stuff going on and like experiences that I need to experience. I don't mean to blab so much. It's just
Yeah, I
your
love
story
it.
has truly inspired me because it's just, of course, I send so much healing and love to your family. I mean, from the center of my heart, honestly.
Mm.
And yeah, you just gotta look for the shiny things and the things that are
Mhm.
going to bring you up day to day.
Yeah.
And there is something truly beautiful about what you're going through. There really is. I can feel it inside of you. And it's just gorgeous. It's
Mhm.
gorgeous. Um, and yeah, the hard times. And sometimes we think, dang, like, why us? Right. And
Mhm.
then you have to realize there is a reason for this. There is a reason for this. And I mean, you're a lot of reasons right now. It's your own reason, it's your husband's reason. Like you were meant to be in his life, your son, like all
Mhm.
meant just to be a part of this plan together. And what
Mhm.
you three have together is just so special. The bond. Most people I don't think will find that bond in a lifetime. Really.
Yeah.
I don't think they would. Um oh my goodness. Yes. And you're a coach? Are you a coach
Mhm. I am, yeah.
for
Women, women like
okay.
us who are
Okay.
cracking open into new dimensions of who they are,
Mhm.
who they're ready to be. Um And I have to, like, pause and thank you for all that you called it blabbing. I wanna say all that beautiful blabbing. It's rare to have conversations like this and to go and, especially with someone who you've just met, that there's that depth of that being witnessed and also that celebrating and that holding space. It's so rare, and to your point about friendships and how that the dynamics of relationships have changed. Absolutely. People that suddenly like leave your life, and at the same time, people that out of the blue enter your life, and you're like, wow. And who has the people that have the capacity to hold space for the bigness of this, because it is beautiful, it's brutal, it's beautiful, it's all the things, is is rare. It's so rare. So I thank you for sharing all those beautiful things, and it all resonates deeply. And I was spiritual before, very much so, and I was already starting on my journey and actually became a coach. I worked in corporate America for many years, and then that was part when I look back at all the moments that I followed my intuition to take on a leap of faith that are all connected, that have brought me into the spaces where I am now. There's a huge also through and storyline there, but yes, that spiritual path. And I became a coach right out of working in corporate America. I did marketing, branding. So, managed a lot of really big projects. And that's always in my wheelhouse and something I love to do. And my work as a coach started really morphing and getting more into the realm of spirituality and that awakening and that revealing, that removing all the filters. What does it mean to walk between, like, to find the points of connection between our humanity and our divinity, and that creative spark that's comes from that space. So of course, going through this massive lesson that life threw my way, and that just I had to, like, walk through. It's not like life threw it in my way. It's like it was part of the path. That's how I feel it. It's just all of a sudden we entered into this new domain and I'm walking through it. So it was never I've heard people say, and I get why people say it. It's like, and I've even said, it threw a wrench in it or curveball because you're not expecting it. But really, truly, it feels to me like we're walking, 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 and then all of a sudden it's like you walk on a map from one land to the next, and then that's the place where you're going to walk through, like, this whole ALS thing. And then there will be other sections of my story and my chapter, and for all three of us. So for sure, my spiritual growth and my understanding and my ability to see, feel, um, and filter anything that's like BS. And I learn all the time and I hit myself in the head, and it's constant, but to filter a lot of the BS that we hold so tight to. And that's also been part of the experience of why it's isolating. And I think anybody who's going through that, your own spiritual evolution and revolution. I think revolution is big, especially at this period of time as we're recording this. There's a lot of stuff happening astrologically that's like pulsing us in that direction. The questioning of who am I really? So that could already be a very isolating experience. And for me, I think also having the work that I do of holding space for others, and I did take a bit of a break. I was still sharing in my newsletter and being somewhat connected to the business because it's not just a business for me. It's really like the calling, right? It's like one of those things you do because it's just there's no other choice. The feeling. I know you feel the same way. Um, and so I definitely can. And recently, the past few months, I've like been I've gotten more support at home during the week. Um, that's been, a few months of having somebody that comes in 10 to 5 to hang out with Jules, like right now while we're doing this, so I can
Mhm.
do other things. That's given me the ability to hold space again for people. And for a while, I actually wasn't able to, not because it was part of me healing and growing and understanding my own bandwidth of how I was able to hold space for others, which was something that came very naturally before, that I've always loved, both one on one workshops, group scenarios, things like that, in person, online, a whole thing. And then I took a break because um, part of me was like, I just, yeah, I had to unplug from all of it. And that took was a whole other chapter and beautiful process of healing that my husband and I did a lot of plant medicine during that time. It was a whole big other transformational journey of a lot of deep healing, which just still continues to ripple in our lives. And then I was like, all right, I'm ready now to hold space again. I'm ready to do that part. And in between, I was also able to unplug from the business things because we were we sold our cars. We had a house that we were renting, which we let go. We stayed with my parents in Puerto Rico for a time. We stayed with his parents here in Miami for a time. So I have that ability also to take that time. And now finding a new space and flow. And I it's so priceless for me to be in such integrity and dedication and passion to what I do, because it's never on the surface. And whatever I do, I want it to be really profoundly impactful. It's and that's a question that I'm always asking myself. And so I'm very cognizant of the people that I work with. And I've noticed that also, that the people that I've worked with have shifted over time, in the sense that I've always had incredible clients and always women that are at the cusp of some great, big, beautiful leap of transformation, or they're settling into a new way of being and they want a mirror, right? That bounces off, like that sense of being courageous, of knowing you can do it, of holding that space. And I've also noticed that the people that it's like they want to go they're it's even deeper. It's like they want to go deeper because they know that we're going to go places that you're not going to go with somebody else. There's incredible coaches and spiritual guides out there, but there are very few of them that are have my sort of like cross section of experiences and things that I know and things that how I've prepared myself and how life has prepared me. So I think whoever still is not ready for that depth of work, it's just not, they're kind of stay at the periphery. And then sometimes
Mhm.
they're like literally be like, okay, I'm ready. Because it's really incredible work and it will shift you. And so that absolutely has informed my practice of coaching. Astrology is something that I've gotten more and more into since my husband's diagnosis. I loved it before and I was already studying it, but I found it's such an incredible, powerful language of validation of what you're going through. And I'd had a
Mhm.
couple of instances before of having really powerful astrological readings that gave me the sense of peace of like, but this was pre ALS of like, oh, okay, that says there, like, it's not about divination, but I really feel it's like, it's about revealing something for you. It's like a way that your soul wants to go, like, really work with that info, not just be like, oh, this is going to happen. It's like, oh, these are the energies at play. And how do you then co create with them or find peace in that story and your part in it? So now coaching somebody without really working with their chart as well, it feels like a disservice because there's so much information there that we could
Yeah.
be leaving on the table if we're not like fully diving into it. So that's also been a lot of, yeah, that the past 4 or 5 years for me have been completely life changing. And it's like just being able to feel and perceive it all in ways that I'm still integrating and getting used to and owning my own inner power around that, which is we're all, especially those of us that are leaning into this path of like, you're your own, you're walking to the beat of your own drummer. You're not the same as most other people around you. We're in this constant struggle and desire to reveal our true self, to own your power, to really own your power because we've been taught that power is dangerous or whatever. And yes, it is in the wrong hands, but that's made us question our own like radiating. And so that's one of the things that I work a lot with. It's that understanding your inner power and having that ability to radiate it out, to not take the world in, but to show the world who you are. And that's it's a challenging and we've gotten so much instruction and information about how things have to be done, which I've also faced when it comes to caring for my husband or being a mom to Skylar. People have this understanding of what it's supposed to look like, and I find people often look at me kind of with confusion of like, how are you smiling? It's like, well, like, you know life is happening and we're finding the joy and we're like, it's kind of confusing to them, but I've made more and more peace with that confusion. And, you know, um, it's like a life in transition all the time, and making peace with that. So, yeah, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It makes complete sense. And this
Yeah.
is a perfect segue into introducing everybody to the podcast that I will be starting. This episode should come out. I'm going to hold it to the end because this is like a full circle thing. So, you, the Mama Jack's Rise and Shine podcast will be released within the next couple weeks. And it is about my spirituality.
I love it.
We'll be starting the basics like Dark Night of the Soul,
The
shadow
basic
work,
Dark Night of the
like,
Soul, basic.
right.
Yeah.
Because most people go through some hard stuff. And then after you've hit your Dark Night of the Soul, that's like, poof, you're awake. Okay, now what do I do? You think back and you're like, well, shit. Was that a Dark Night of the Soul? Was that one? Was that one? Were they trying to knock and wake me up there and there and there? And finally, this is the one that took me. Like, you realize it. So, yes, that is coming. The Mama Jack's Rise and Shine podcast. Rise because we're raising our frequency all the time, and shine because that inner light has to come out. And I want to thank you so much for being here today. I'm hoping you're going to do an episode of Rise and Shine, right?
100,000%. Yes.
Yes. And we will be co-hosting on that. I don't have guests. I have co-hosts. We co-host episodes together. So
I love
we
it.
get to collaborate and it'll be so much fun. And thank you so much for doing this episode for me. And what a great segue into the next stage of the Mama Jack. And parenting will still be here every year, still here, but we are starting on a spiritual journey as well.
I'm so happy you're doing that.
Thank you so much, M.A. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Absolutely. My pleasure. This was so awesome. Big smile on my face and in my heart. Thank you.
Welcome to the end of another episode of the Mama Jack Real Raw Parenting Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember, parenting is a journey filled with ups and downs, and it's okay to make mistakes along the way. The Mama Jack podcast is here to provide you with support, guidance, and real-life stories from fellow parents who are navigating the challenges of raising children. If you have any questions, topics you'd like me to cover, or stories you'd like to share, please reach out to me. I love hearing from my listeners and incorporating your experiences into future episodes. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Podpage, all under The Mama Jack. TheMamaJac. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and together we can create a supportive community of real, raw parents. Stay tuned for more episodes filled with laughter, tears, and everything in between. Until next time, keep being the amazing parent that you are.